So, I watched a movie last night called God's Not Dead. It's by Pure Flix Entertainment, which does these very, very I guess single minded is the best word for it, propaganda films from a Christian evangelical standpoint. And I was curious to watch one of them. I'd never seen any of them, and God's Not Dead is kind of their signature film, if you will. And I really became aware of them more recently because they put out a movie called Unplanned, which is this anti abortion thing. And it's based on the memoir of Abby Johnson, who worked for Planned Parenthood and claims that she decided to leave Planned Parenthood and become an anti-abortion activist because one day she walked in on an abortion and saw the sonogram footage, and by her account, as the suction was being done, the baby was holding on for dear life, which numerous medical persons in the medical field came forward and said that actually physically could not happen, and the baby would not have an awareness of danger. Uh, but anyway, so some bupkis there, but I was kind of interested to see, and especially because now I'm trying to find with a lot of these things the diamond in the rough. That hopefully there will be something I can relate to. And so I watched God Is Not Dead, and the premise is that there is a college in somewhere USA where there is a college professor played by Kevin Sorbo who is a philosophy professor, and he is just this notorious atheist, and his entire class is geared towards beating faith out of his students and everything. And so, in the first day of the first class, he has all of his students take out a piece of paper, write "God is dead," and sign their names to it and hand it over. And and it's like if you don't, he'll fail you. He'll fail you for the class if you don't sign in writing that God is dead. And then, of course, there's one student who is Christian who stands up to him, and he says, "All right, well, if that's how you feel, we'll have a series of debates, and you can prove that you have to prove God is." He says you have to prove God is real, or I'm going to fail you and ruin your GPA and all this. And it from the outset, it's such a completely absurd premise because first of all, a serious, highly regarded, respected professor of philosophy uh, is not going to it is not going to first of all is going to know that proving or disproving God is not a it is a matter of or the existence of God is a matter of philosophical conjecture. It is not something that can be proven or unproven. And so, I mean, literally in real life, if something like this happened, first of all, there would not be just one kid, one Christian kid in the class. There would be, there would be so many filing, so many complaints, and so many parents swooping in with lawsuits that it would be absolutely absurd that this would ever occur. But really, all the kid would need to do to refute this is to say, I can't prove that there is a God. Believing in God or faith in God is a matter of belief. It is belief in something that is unproven, that fundamentally cannot be proven. And you, as a philosophy teacher or philosophy professor, should know that. So, no, I'm not going to be part of your little thing. Now, knock it off, or I'm going to file a complaint because you can't discriminate against me for my religious beliefs. I mean, it's very simple. Just get back and do teach your philosophy class. And so the movie unfolds around all of the people who are tangentially related to these two people, um, and their how they react to it. And again, it's just so bizarre because the kid is so surrounded by so few unsupportive people, or is surrounded by so many unsupportive people that it's patently unrealistic just from a population standpoint. But thinking about it, the first thing that struck me though is the film gets Nietzsche wrong. Nietzsche was arguing when Nietzsche said God is dead. The full phrase is God is dead and we have killed him. And the point was supposed to be that he was not making a case one way or the other about the literal existence of God. What he was saying was that we are entering humanity is entering a time, an existence, or a period of its existence where it is going to move away from belief, religious faith as the archetypal structure, psychological structure that gives human beings foundation and foundation and understanding in the world. It's going to move away from that and move into science to understand the world, and in so doing is going to abandon the sense of meaning and the sense of purpose and all of that, and the sense of morality and all of that that people have previously gotten from religion. And his great fear was, what are the secular gods going to be? And so, while Nietzsche himself was an opponent of organized religion, his actual argument, his actual philosophical argument, should be something that religious people would want to embrace and would want to grapple with, and indeed, in many ways, they do. So he gets that wrong. Then the next thing the Kevin Sorbo character, the professor, does, or the first thing he does, is he puts this list of names on the board and says, all of these great philosophers are atheists. So if we can go ahead and accept that there is no God, that will make my job so much easier. And it's like, again, that's just argumentum ad populum. The number of people that do or don't believe in God, or do or don't believe in any proposition, has no bearing on whether or not the proposition is correct. And then the next thing, the next tactic he tries with the kid is he tries to say, oh, so you're saying Stephen Hawking is wrong. Stephen Hawking, the most respected mental giant on the planet, etc., etc. And again, that's argument from authority fallacy. I mean, these are not things that a legitimate philosophy professor is going to be doing, is going to be falling into. So that struck me as ridiculous right out of the gate. And there is a flatness to the movie. It's like all of the people are basically, all the characters basically communicate in platitudes and short speeches about different beliefs and all of this, different beliefs that they hold and everything. And I was thinking, it's funny, as people know, I'm a fan of Ayn Rand. I was thinking this is probably how Ayn Rand sounds to people that aren't enjoying the book. It's just these people standing around talking and having these weirdly stilted Socratic dialogues about the nature of God and everything. And it's literally like, at one point somebody says something like, but noted atheist Richard Dawkins suggests in his book The God Delusion that, it's like you're literally just, it's literally just worded as a citation within the dialogue of the movie. And so I think it really falls short, because the thing is, what happens is, and as I was reading up on the reviews it got, other people have noticed this, or have observed this. It really is not something that would conceivably convert anybody. I don't think it was very much a thing of speaking to the choir, and really feel, and you can really detect that in the sense that the message is more to believing Christians of, don't worry about the atheists, they're all mean, horrible people. And indeed that's the case. There is no sympathetic atheist voice within the film. And one example that just really blew my mind is that there's a character in there who is this kind of ruthless businessman, and at one point his girlfriend calls him for directions to where she's going, and he says, well, what's in it for me? And then this really blew my mind. She is diagnosed with cancer, and they have a scene where they're having dinner at this restaurant, and he sits down and tells her that he made partner at the firm. And she says, well, and she tells him, I have cancer, and he is mad at her for ruining their evening. He says, well, couldn't this have waited? We're here to celebrate me and all this. And he gets up and storms off and leaves and breaks up with her right then and there, and storms out of the room. And it's like if a guy actually if a person actually had that reaction, his problem is not that he's an atheist. His problem is that he's a sociopath. So it's this completely absurd portrayal of atheists, where every atheist is a heartless bastard that is motivated by personal demons. They feel let down by God and all of that. And so there, because there is no realistic, there's absolutely no realistic portrayal of atheists at all. And and the problem is that is going to work if you're trying to convert people from atheism to Christianity. That's going to work against you. I mean, that is going to work against you, because all you're doing is saying, well, if you don't think like we do, you're a horrible person, and that's just a great way to alienate people. And so that that was, that made me, I mean, that was off-putting. And coming from having been an atheist, I thought, yeah, if I heard that in my atheist days, I would have just laughed it off and gone on. And it does feed into this kind of evangelical persecution complex that they want to pretend that they have. They want to pretend that they're somehow getting the short end of the stick. And ultimately, like I said, the argument, the debates back and forth with the professor in the class that the kid is having, it ultimately boils down to the kid kind of emotionally unloading on the professor until the professor finally blows up and admits that he's angry at God and all of this. So it's just a purely emotional argument, and then everybody stands up and says, God is not dead. Guys like, I am Spartacus. They all finally stand up and say, God's not dead, and all of this crap. Also, there's a scene where the professor grabs the kid by the arm and spins him around, and, like in the hallway, it's like, okay, that was just physical assault. This would never occur. None of this could ever occur in reality. And so, you're kind of, it's such a straw argument that, you kind of wonder what the ultimate message of the film is, besides, of course, the Newsboys are a band. They're everywhere in the movie, but it's practically like the Newsboys' Hard Day's Night. But anyway, so as I watched it, there were a couple of observations about spirituality and about faith that were nice, that were insightful, I felt. One of the main ones is, the guy who's such a heartless bastard. I'm giving all this away. You can watch it if you want, but it's one of those movies that, like, you kind of know everything that's going to happen the minute it starts. But one of the guy, the businessman that's so heartless, he at one point goes to visit his mother who has Alzheimer's, and she does not recognize him. And thinking that she does not recognize him, he says, "You are the nicest, kindest person I've ever known, and you've ended up like this. But yet I'm the meanest person I've ever known, and I've made all of this money and everything. How do you explain that in light of your faith and all that?" And she says, sometimes the devil sometimes the devil gives you good fortune in this life so that you won't turn to God. And she says, just because she says you're in a prison cell, but you don't realize you're in a prison cell because it's so comfortable. And it's so comfortable you don't feel any desire to leave, and then eventually the door slams shut before you realize it. And I like that. I like the argument that she's trying to make, or that she's making there, that's being made there. That contained in and of itself is very insightful. I felt, but the movie, if you want to, from a storytelling standpoint, if you want to convert people, what you have to do is not begin from a premise of every single person that doesn't think like you is a horrible person. You can't begin from that premise and hope to convert people. Like in the case of the "I just made partner, but my girlfriend has cancer" thing, what you do is you would set up a story thread of somebody who is deeply conflicted about how he feels at this point, and trying to balance his personal accomplishment with his wanting to be a good boyfriend and be supportive of his girlfriend while she's going through this, and show how his eventual burgeoning religious faith, exploring going into faith, gives him the ability to balance these two great, these two great pressure points in his life and everything. You do it on a more subtle level, and you acknowledge the basic humanity of the other side. Um, the thing is, though, part of me though wants to say that maybe these characters are meant to be more symbolic. That it's a more romanticized idea concept where certain characters represent certain values, but it really doesn't do that, even because it's like all of the characters in this slot represent these values, all of the characters in these slots represent these values, and it's just like different ones happen to be different facets of that reality. Like this guy happens to be a college kid who's a Christian, or this character happens to be a pastor at a church who's a Christian, or over here we have a college kid who's an atheist and a professor who's an atheist. It's like they all fall into the same meta categories, if that makes sense. So watching it, I mean, there were some feel good moments, and it did. It's funny. It's like it did leave me feeling upbeat. I mean, it is a very upbeat movie ultimately, but it certainly was not. It was not unpleasant to watch. It was just there were just these moments of extraordinarily shallow absurdity, and the philosophical arguments that the kid makes. Again, it's like you have to. You feel like you have to say, okay, well, this is not. We're not doing. This is not what you're presenting here. Is not a philosophical argument. It's a biological argument, that kind of thing, or it's a it's a biological argument, not metaphysical or scientific, that kind of thing. And it's that it keeps towing the waters of the old creationist idea of, well, if we can disprove evolution, then we're right automatically, or if we can tie our thing into evolution, that kind of thing. And again, none of the arguments that they present, like for example, one of the arguments that he presents is there's some intellectual, some thinker who says, well, the description of the Big Bang is exactly what we would expect to see happen if God had commanded the universe to come into existence. And that's a rather ridiculous idea, because there's no way to objectively quantify what would happen in calling the universe into existence. So it's coming to that coming to a movie like this from a position of faith, all it really does for me, aside from remind me that the Newsboys are a band, all it really does is just kind of seem like a set of very weak arguments. I didn't see it as reinforcing or building up faith. It seemed to be speaking more to the politics of contemporary right-wing evangelical Christianity rather than anything else. And I think when you try to create that echo chamber feeling, is just stifling. Real people are not like that. Real people are dynamic. They have strengths and weaknesses. They change over time. So anyway, those are my thoughts on it. If you want to see it, it's on Amazon Prime. And yeah,